listeners. And so the first we're listening that we shared together was with Peter Alexander. And I'm thrilled to have him here today because I enjoyed him being with us so much. I thought it would make a lot of good sense if he would host this for us, which doesn't seem like that's happening because I'm the one that's talking right now.
That's okay.
But I thought that I'd open us with prayer, and then Peter can talk for a while as we wait for Marion to join us. So
I'm on.
Oh, there you are. Very good. Thank you for being here. We're just getting ready to open with prayer. And I'll tell you, we will begin wrapping this up after about an hour. And then if others want to stay, Marion said he could stay past that time if people had questions. But we know everybody's busy, and I know you don't want to leave in the middle of something. So we'll wrap it up a little bit around an hour, and then anyone's welcome to stay. So let's pray together. Loving and gracious God, we thank you for the beautiful day that you've given us today. And we join our hearts to listen to our friend Marion and with our friend Marion, and pray that your spirit would be with us so that our understanding would be deepened and our hearts would be widened and our spirits hopeful to be about good work in your beautiful world. We think about those today who are really struggling while we are comfortable and safe. And we pray all these things in the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Carol, and thank you everyone for gathering together. If anyone has any problems seeing or hearing, just let me know. I'll try to speak up. I thought I'd begin. The judge and I had a conversation, and we're going to try to talk back and forth for about a half an hour, and then, as we did last month, leave time for the rest of you folks to add your thoughts and comments and ask your own questions. But I thought I'd ask the judge by starting to tell us the story of how you get from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, to the bench and to the ministry. And for those of you who wonder why I keep calling him the judge, I am not a Presbyterian, but a law professor and a practicing attorney. And to me, he will always be judge.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I grew up in Pine Bluff at a time of segregation. And I tell young people around me that they missed out on something. They missed out on the segregated system under which I grew up in Pine Bluff. And not until the 1964 Civil Rights Bill were public accommodations and all kind of restaurants and facilities open to all people. I grew up in a community, in a single family home. I lived with my mother, her sister, and her sister's 3 children who are like brother and sisters to me. My grandparents, and they were elderly. My grandfather, James Pendleton, was born in slavery. He was born in 1861. I was 11 when he died in 1960. And my grandmother was his 3rd wife. He had buried two wives, and so he married a young woman. She was 33 years younger than Papa. And she was born in 1894, and she lived a long life. She died in 1997 at 103, and Papa himself lived to be 99. And we were poor, and my mother worked in private homes. My aunt worked a lot of times in laundries. My cousin has written a book about that experience, and her leaving from Pine Bluff and ending up at the Ethel Walker School in Simsbury, Connecticut, a boarding school. And then she went on to Wesleyan. She's a teacher in Louisville, formerly chair of the Department of Teacher Education at Arkansas State, by the way. And so she's written about that. I tell her, I don't know how you wrote all your business. And Carol, that's why I got your address so I could send you a copy of her book. I intend to do that. But we grew up at a time where people taught us that opportunities were available, and we grew up in a very religious home, Christian home. We were Baptists, grew up in the Baptist church. I don't know how I got to be a Presbyterian, except one of the things I did was in 1965, the Presbyterian Church sponsored a summer program at Knoxville College, Presbyterian School in Knoxville, Tennessee. and Black kids from around the South were invited there. And this is something that the Presbyterians have done all along in emphasizing education. And they didn't care what denomination we were a part of or anything, and they brought us there. They had all kinds of cultural activities for us. And as a matter of fact, there was an admissions officer from Phillips Exeter Academy who came to interview students or recruit. And so I was one who applied, and I went there, but it was based upon the program. It was called the Summer Study Skills Program. And there were Black kids from different communities in the South who were there participating. And this Mr. Jackson, I remember, came, and as a result, I left home and went there. But growing up was, it was really a fun time. I tell my son, and my nieces and nephew, I call my cousins' children my nieces and nephews, by the way. I tell them they don't understand that we were able to have a good life and enjoy life even under those circumstances. So I showed him one day the stairway around to the side of the Singer Theater in Pine Bluff, where Black kids used to have to go through that side door and go up some dingy stairs and sit in the balcony at the Singer Theater in Pine Bluff. And the white kids sat down on the floor. They went through the front door and sat on the ground floor. The thing about it is, we were poor, so I was happy just to get a chance to go to the movie, and I didn't think about it at the outset of the discrimination, because it was a way of life anyway. I rode at the back of the bus when I could afford bus fare in Pine Bluff. And I was subjected to all of those kinds of considerations. And of course, the Pine Bluff School District, I think, had consolidation in 1970. And by that time, I had left home. But we had a very firm spiritual indoctrination, and I think we had a really fine foundation. I grew up in a wonderful church, St. Paul Baptist Church. And I'll tell you about this particular Baptist church. A lot of the people who attended there, a number of the people rather, who attended there were connected to what was then Arkansas A&M College, the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. So it wasn't a difficulty for me to come from that particular Baptist church and go to a Presbyterian church where they used the hymn book, because the director of the choir was Shelton McGee. Well, one of the choir members.
Copper infused 3-layer face mask.
I think somebody may have to mute their Zoom connection for us, please.
Pardon?
Someone probably has to mute their Zoom connection. I think we've taken care of it. Go ahead, Judge.
Okay. The organist there, she played a pipe organ, but she was chair of the Department of Music at A&M and UAPB. So she was pretty structured in the music. So I've always grown up liking hymns. For I think that's one of the reasons why I like the hymn book today. But at any rate, experiences then flowed, opportunities flowed out of those experiences. And so I guess it was always intended that I'd be a Presbyterian because of the experience I had at the Summer Study Skills Program at Knoxville College in 1965.
We're pleased to have you as a Presbyterian. Your education took you up north, not only to Phillips Exeter, but to Princeton and to the Harvard Divinity School. Could you reflect for us on experiences that you had with other races in the North compared to your experience growing up?
Oh, well, when I grew up in Pine Bluff, of course, the races were segregated. And I didn't go to school with white people until I went to Exeter. And that was something else. I'm just glad that I survived. I tell people, I think I might have been able to perform better had I not been so tired the whole time I was there. I was there 2 years, and I was literally tired. And I think it was because of the regimen that we had to undergo. You know, we had to be up in the mornings by 8 o'clock at chapel, which means you have to have gone to breakfast, and it was required that you make up your bed. So you had to make up your bed, you had to go to breakfast, go to chapel, start classes, and attendance was mandatory. You couldn't miss a class. And then in the afternoon, there were required sports. And I think that's really why I was tired. I'm not an athlete, you know, I was fasting. And so it was required that you go. I'm like, this is just I was running stairs, trying to play soccer, trying to figure out something that I could do in a sport, trying to run track and all these kind of things. Then go back, get your lesson done, be in bed by 10 o'clock, and then start the whole process the next day.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it while I was doing, but literally I thought about it afterwards. I think I was physically tired, just because it was so different and something that I had not done. That aside from all the rest.
Sure. Did you feel welcomed by the other students?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
And how about your professors?
I think so, but the problem with Exeter, though, Exeter is not a nurturing community. Okay. You either know it or you don't know it, and there are people at that time. Now, I don't know how it is now. I think things have evolved. Oh, another thing I was scholarship. It was all, that's the other thing. It was all male at the time I went there. I had never been through this experience. I'm in New England, all male, and I was a scholarship boy. So part of I had to have a job. And I waited on tables and things like that. So that was additional that I had to do. I think people thought that they were opening up and that they were doing what they could or should be doing in making contribution to an inclusive society. Sure, there are some things that they didn't get. I think I went back through there in some years, and I don't think, for instance, the scholarship boys were as identifiable as we were back at my time. And of course, they had gone co-ed, which made it a whole lot better, I think, for the whole atmosphere. Mm-hmm. It would have been different for me coming from Pine Bluff and the background I had had. But, you know, obviously, there are some things that could have been done differently. I remember we had a Black group there, the Afro-Exonians of all things, and so we were trying to figure out a way to have some Black girls on campus because you did have mixers and things, but very few of those schools had them. And the one that had the most Black girls in that area was Northfield Mount Hermon in Massachusetts. But it wasn't Northfield Mount Hermon then, it was Northfield School. It was across the street from Mount Hermon, a boys' school. The girls' school was Northfield. Northfield had the most. They are now combined, it's now Northfield Mount Hermon. But the problem with their coming to our campus was that they were prohibited from going to any social affairs, any kind of mixers, because they could do it with Mount Hermon. So they could go to Mount Hermon, but they weren't allowed to travel. So we had to be creative, and we came up with the idea of having an African-American conference. And so they were permitted to come to our campus because of an educational conference.
Very good. Reflect on your personal reaction being an African-American man from the South who's now thrown into the Northern educational environment.
It was different. It was difficult all the way around. And I don't think there was another student from Arkansas there, period, white or Black. And there were a few, Texas always had a contingency of folks, but Atlanta maybe. Mm-hmm. But by and large, there weren't all that many Southerners, period, but none other from Arkansas. And so I had to learn to navigate things for myself at a fairly young age, at 16 years old. I had to make out my own schedule for coming back and forth to Arkansas. And, you know, transportation wasn't easy, the most convenient for us. New Hampshire itself, I had to fly in and out of Boston, out of Logan Airport. And I'd have to try to get things timed, and the schedule of flights just didn't cooperate with what I would have to do. And before we left, each time we had chapel. So the flights, I couldn't get to the airport until a certain time of morning from New Hampshire. Then I think I was flying American Airlines mostly. And I could fly from Boston to New York, change planes in LaGuardia, and fly to Memphis. And back then they had Trans-Texas Airways from Memphis to Pine Bluff. So I did that a number of times. Trans-Texas, something else too. And then other times I did fly to Little Rock, but we didn't have a car. So my mother would always have to get someone to pick me up, or they come get me with the folks. And we did it like that.
So after being in New Hampshire and then in Princeton and New Jersey and Harvard Divinity School in Massachusetts, you returned to Arkansas to go to law school at the University of Arkansas.
Well, that's not exactly the way it was done. I had a good time at Princeton, that's one thing. When I got to Princeton, all that regimentation I'd had at Exeter, I rebelled against that. So, you know, I had a good time there. And I was admitted to law school, and at first I didn't go. I started off at Antioch in Washington, D.C., and I think I was there a week or so, and it just didn't feel right. So I went back home. I worked as a newspaper reporter with Pine Bluff Commercial, first as a copy editor, then a newspaper reporter. And then I went to law school the next year, and I wasn't doing anything worthwhile in law school. It was a bummer for me. I was, you know, I guess I had this preacher instinct all along. I wanted to expound on things. I wanted to give my thoughts. And in law school, you're just regurgitating what the law. You got to learn the law because that's what you have to apply. Right. And it was. I found it boring because much because of that. It was almost like a friend of mine at the University of Arkansas who went to medical school. He was from Marvell, Arkansas, did real well at Fayetteville undergrad and went to Harvard Medical School. But he told me one day, he said he knew he couldn't be a lawyer because he looked at the books and he didn't see any pictures. And so it's just weird. So he went to medical school. He's, you know, all of these words that you're dealing with in law, you need something a little animated in there, you know. So, and I guess I didn't feel that there was an outlet to say what I thought about things, and that's kind of difficult for somebody who's preachy.
So let's fast forward. So you finish law school and you practice law and you wind up on the bench. So most people might assume that as a judge sitting on the bench, you wouldn't have to deal with prejudice and racial injustice. Did you experience those things even after you became a judge?
Sure. I mean, but it's nothing that I didn't anticipate. And I tend to be political. I understand you're breaking new ground. There was a lot of resentment, first of all, I think still to some extent, not as much as it used to be, about the whole Hunt decree that allowed for the election of African-American judges. And actually before that, I was Little Rock, what was then called municipal court judge. It's now called district court. Yes. But I was elected in 1988. And I was elected at a time where the city of Little Rock did not have runoffs in their municipal races, including the judicial race, and it was treated more as a municipal election rather than a judicial election back then. So I actually won in a race with a plurality And as I tell people, I won with a whopping 28% of the vote.
There you go.
Now, you know that after I won with 28% of the vote, the law was changed.
Yes. Yes.
The law was changed. And I'm going to tell you, it was a white guy that got me in that race. A guy by the name of Bill Pascal here in Little Rock, who started, he was a political consultant. Now he does mostly, public relations stuff, but not so much political anymore. Pascal came to me and he said he had seen me somewhere else. I think I had been involved in the Al Gore campaign in 1988. He didn't see me I was with Al Gore rather than Jesse Jackson that year. That's what I think really attracted his attention. Okay. And so he came to me and he said, the municipal judgeship is open. I think you'd be a good candidate. And he said, look, there are 4 white candidates who have said they're going to run. And they have taken some steps. They have bought some campaign literature. So that means that they're in. And the incumbent, being one of them, was very unpopular for a number of reasons. He had done some things that people did not like. So that's why so many people into the race. He said, if you get in it, and if you work the African-American community, and you work Hillcrest and the Heights, you can win this thing.
Wow.
Well, I sat up in my seat because I had come from Pine Bluff, and Pine Bluff, you did not have, the thing is, Little Rock had a plurality election because it was a city manager form of government.
Okay.
In the state of Arkansas, if you had a mayor council form of government, you had runoffs and you had party designations. So it was different only because of that. And he had to tell me that because I knew, having grown up in Pine Bluff, that you have runoffs if there's no majority, and that's because it was by party designation. And I had run for state senator in 1982 in Pine Bluff and lost, and I wasn't interested in running just to be running. So when he said that there will be no runoff, he said there are 4 white candidates in the race. And here's your strategy. You work the African-American community, and you go up to Hillcrest, and you go up to the Heights, and you can win it. Well, that made sense. That made practical sense.
Sure.
And so I got in the race, and I had 28% of the vote. The next person had 26%. And as I've told my congregation and others, Jesus has something to do with it when you win with 28% of the vote.
Amen. Amen. So
I said I could stick my chest out. If I won with 51 or 60% of the vote, but when you win with 28%, the Lord has blessed you, and so you take it as that.
And when you win with 28% of the vote, you're still judge.
You're still judge. You have the same authority.
That's right.
I think some surprised that I took it as having the same authority, but I had seen what happened with a Black guy by the name of Leo Chipman, who won over in West Memphis mayor with a plurality. And I think he approached it as though, having won with a plurality, he was a little bit more tenuous or tentative in some of the things he did. And they ran over me anyway, and he was kicked out the next election. So I figure if I'm here, might as well go for it. Go for it and do it the way that I think it should be done. And so then, here's the Lord. Now, I believe this way. In 1992, first of all, Ben McGee was a state representative over from Marion, Arkansas. And when the legislature, as soon as I was elected, seemingly, there was a bill pushed by surely people in Pulaski County to change the way elections were done in the city of Little Rock. That you could still win with a plurality, but you would have to have had at least 40%. So Ben called me at my office. He said, Judge, you want to come over here and testify against the Marion Humphrey bill? I said, Bill, there's no point in that because next time they're going to run me 101. It won't make any difference.
There you go.
but here again, opportunities are made available.
Right.
And this is part of my experience with the Lord.
That's a wonderful.
The next time around,
story.
in 1991, the Hunt Decree came into effect. So there were some majority African-American districts created. And instead of running for re-election, where into a seat where I won it with the plurality, I ran instead for a circuit judgeship in this new district created by the Hunt Decree. And I won that vote with, I won it with a bigger margin. Last I saw it, I had an opponent. But I think I had 82% in that race.
Those are the numbers you won the first time reverse. That's pretty impressive.
That is, I hadn't thought about the reverse until you just said that.
There you go. So let's talk about that. For those who don't know how the courts work, a circuit judge is going to have more power, is going to have a broader portfolio of cases that they're going to hear. And among those, you did a lot of criminal cases, and you had to adjudicate some very serious cases, including murders. And one of the things that I know about you is that normally when a person pleads guilty, which makes things go away a little bit faster, there's a litany of questions that we have to ask a defendant before the judge can accept the guilty plea. But what I've heard about you is that you would ask even more questions and really get the defendant to own up to whatever he or she might have done. And particularly because you had a lot of African Americans in front of you, why did you feel it was important to go that extra mile with these defendants?
Well, my experience in getting to be a judge was different from others. I had worked for Prison Fellowship, a prison ministry that was started by Chuck Colson after he was released from jail for his role in the break-in to
in the Watergate.
Ellsberg's
in the Ellsberg case.
Yes, and he made the distinction between involvement in the Watergate break-in as opposed to the break-in of Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office. And so I went to a lot of prisons, a whole lot of prisons. And I talked with a lot of people who were inmates and incarcerated. And it was at that point that I really discovered just how big a percentage of African Americans there were in prison. I hadn't really thought about it to that extent until I started working for a Prison Fellowship, and that was about 1979, I think. And I came away thinking that it is important that people articulate why they did something, because it causes them to think about it. You could come into the court I had, and you can enter your plea of guilty and say, yes, I did that, and run on out of there. And you're not challenged to understand the implications of your involvement in crime and what you have done to another person. So I liked the idea of taking time to ask people, well, why did you do this? Well, I got with the wrong crowd. Why did you get with the wrong crowd? Well, people don't want to really say, they don't want to talk about it. They want to enter a plea and get on out of there and stop looking at this old judge sitting up here bothering me, trying to make me talk. The courtroom has other people in there. I don't want to say anything to other people. And my question sometimes would be, why don't you get with the right crowd? And if you didn't find a right crowd, why don't you stand alone and let a crowd form around you? Why do you do it? Do you think someone really wants you breaking into their house, stealing stuff that they have worked for? How would you like it if someone did that to you? And just talk to folks about this, because they're human beings. They have some understanding. And some people are just out here doing stuff. And one was humorous one day. He actually busted out laughing when I was questioning him. He had a drug charge. I think he had some crack cocaine or something. And he said it was his birthday. And so they were just having a party with this crack cocaine. And I looked at him and I said, whatever happened to cake and ice cream?
Amen.
He busted
Amen.
out laughing.
Good. Yeah. Wow.
Because here he is talking about, oh, to celebrate his birthday, you gotta have some crack. I was, what about some cake and ice cream, dude?
Wow. Wow. Well, before I turn it over to everybody who's watching on Zoom, I want to ask you, it's probably a more difficult question. From all of your experiences as a lawyer and as a judge and as a political activist, why is it that we're seeing so many of our young men in this criminal justice system and so many of our young men incarcerated?
I don't know. It's troubling to me, and I said in an article that was written in the Democrat Gazette when I retired, that the thing that bothered me the most was so much of this violence in our community. It just troubles me. But right now, as we speak, one of my church members is sitting up in jail charged with first-degree murder for having killed the young man at a family hour of all things a month or so ago. A couple months ago now. 21 years old. I never would have thought that he'd be involved in this. And, you know, he has his defense, and we'll hear that. And then I look and see these young men down at Southern Arkansas University, 4 charged with capital murder, and the death of a young man who is a senior, who is an engineering student. And I'm saying we can't afford to lose young men like this in our community. Here are 3 football players. You know, when I grew up, football players were popular with the girls, and I can understand that, but I don't understand this violence. Somebody who's a football player who has athletic ability, unlike somebody like me. You know, why are you even remotely involved with something like this?
Yeah.
What is going on? It's distressing sometimes, and it doesn't seem to stop. And I had relatives call me about all of these things. You know, because I do some legal work. I'm trying to restrict that to mild stuff, though. I refer them. I refer them to other attorneys about these cases, because I just don't have the stomach for it, and I'm too old for it, and it's just not a good look.
Yeah.
And I just think we just have to be prayerful, and it's not a matter that some of these kids haven't been trained better and taught better. I don't know what it is. I guess it's the association. It's one thing, though. All these kids have these guns out here. And so if you have the gun, it's a possibility you're going to use the gun.
Yeah.
If they didn't have a weapon with them, they wouldn't do this, but they do, and they don't have the best judgment. And they're easily offended or feel that they're disrespected. I don't understand that. And but it's the reality of life, and you deal with them as you can. You can't write them off, but you do what you can do.
Well, I thank you for answering my questions. I was reading some information about you.
Peter Alexander.
Yes. Oh, did I hear somebody say my name? Oh, I was just going to say to the judge that when I was reading about you, one of the things that I read that impressed me very much and has stuck with me in my research is that you commented that when you had a defendant before you, perhaps who was charged with murder, you always realized that there were 2 families that were going to be devastated in this process.
Yes.
The family that lost the child, but the family that's going to lose their child because they'll be incarcerated. And I want to thank you for reminding all of us of the devastation that these kinds of crimes have. There are multiple families who are always involved.
They're always, and let me give you, there was a case I had where I was tough on this particular person. There were 3 young men charged with killing 2 other young men, and they took them out to Heinemann Park and shot them down. First of all, they put them in the trunk. And I'm just looking at this whole scenario. There were 2 young ladies who lured, I think, these 2 young men over to a particular house. And once they got there, these other 3 guys came out of the room. Now, I think one might have been the boyfriend of one of the girls who had these other two guys over there. And I don't have to say why these two guys went over there with these two girls, but when they got there, something else occurred. And one of them had probably been involved in a drug deal with one of the guys. So they come out, the three guys, grab these guys, tie them up, put them in the trunk, then take them out to Heinemann Park, shoot them down, kill them. There were two of them who were convicted of first-degree murder and given life sentences, and the third one had entered a plea with me, and he was supposed to get a lesser sentence recommendation from the prosecutor in return for his testimony against one or two of the others. But at the time of the trial of the person where he was supposed to give testimony, he flipped the script on the prosecutor.
Oh, wow.
And did not say what the prosecutor thought that he would say. And he had given his plea to me. And in Arkansas, unlike what seems to be the case with Michael Flynn up there, once the plea is entered, and you've got this interval where you before you do the sentencing, but once the plea is entered, you have to request that the judge allow you to withdraw the plea. And in this particular case, I did not permit him to withdraw his plea. I denied his motion to withdraw the plea. And I imposed the same sentence on him that the other two had received, which was a life sentence. Well, you have one mother, the mother of the defendant on one side of the courtroom, but you've got this other mother on the other side. And the mother of one of the two boys killed caught my eye. I was on the bench, she was in the audience, and she did this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's let our guests communicate with you and see if anyone has questions or statements they'd like to make. And Carol, I'll let you moderate this part.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Make sure I can see everybody here. All right, let's see. Nancy, did you have your hand up? Oh, so if you have a question, put your hand up or put your little yellow hand up.
Don't forget
okay. Julie, I think you've got your hand up.
Yes, I had to put my glasses on to see unmute. Judge Humphrey, you are such a respected figure in this community. You are a judge. You are a pastor, and yet you are a Black man. And I would just ask you to share with us, if you're willing, how you personally experience racism, if you do, still in your life. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means that I have to be vigilant. And that's why I suggest to young people that you can't rest on your laurels. You can't rest on what others have done to open up opportunities. You've got to stay on it. And so it gives me something to do, really. It gives me purpose or cause to be involved in. I don't have to go out and look for a cause or something to do. It's there. And so I try to stay involved, and now being older, I really try to push the younger people and encourage them to fight the battles that I think need to be fought, and to be of support and to mentor. I think it's time for a new group. And so I've been involved in political activities, supporting people, encouraging them. That's just the way I see it. And there are always some people who help you out. As I said, the person who got me involved in running for judge up here was a white guy. Bill Pascal is the one who came up with that strategy. And Julie, I don't know if you know some of the same people I know in Pine Bluff, But when I got ready to run in 1988, you know how you have to assemble your campaign committees and get people to go out and support you. I had a young white woman who signed up to work with me, and she was a stockbroker over at what was then Dean Witter, Morgan Stanley now, I think. Do you know Allison White?
Oh, yes, I do. Very well.
Ann and Al White's daughter.
Yes.
Allison took me all through Dean Witter and saying, vote for Marion, vote for Marion. He's a good guy. And as I tell folks, and I've used this in my sermons, Peter, I didn't say a word. I just smiled because, you know, why should I say anything? She was doing such a great job. I didn't want to mess it up. The fact of the matter is, my mother worked for her mother for over 35 years.
Oh.
They're at 35th and Cherry.
Yes.
So of all the people signing up to be on my campaign committee, Allison White really did know me. she knew me, and she never told them that that was the context, that my mother had worked for them and fixed her meals and made up her bed and all these kind of things. But that's the situation. She's now Allison Lewis, and just lost her dad a couple of weeks ago. Al White, Al died.
Marion, oh, I'm sorry. We have another question here. If it's from Liz and Bill Branch. Can I ask you this on their behalf?
Yes.
Yeah, and I didn't thank Stuart for being the tech person today. So Stuart, if you see people, help me with that. I don't want to miss anybody. And if I do, put something in the chat. That's
Got Becky Purcell and Angela Epps in the hopper to ask questions.
okay, good. Thank you, Becky and Angela. Marion, what are the primary battles you think the Black and white communities can fight best together? And what battles do you think the Black community seems to be fighting alone, and why is that?
Well,
You got that?
well, I think together we have to fight stereotypes. We also have to recognize that once African Americans, I find, once people get in a position, it's hard for them to get the same respect sometimes as whites are given, or the same deference. No matter the position that an individual is in, their efforts to circumvent their authority, there's difference in treatment. I always thought that, for instance, being a judge, things that people don't see. If you're a circuit court judge in Pulaski County, you've got to go to the quorum court to get your budget.
Yeah.
I always thought that it was more difficult for me to get some things than, say, a white judge across the hall. And I think that even the media reflected differently on me. They were always finding something to write about in my court. And there were things going on in some of these other courts as well, but it seemed as though there was an interest. And of course, a couple of times I had some things that happened that should not have happened at all. So they were right on those. But there's a lot of day-to-day things that you look at, whether or not your staff gets the same consideration. One judge may say, I need another position. And does the quorum court try to work something out so that judge can get that position, pay for it? And then if I go over and say, I need a position, do they then say, oh, we don't have any money, we're having to pay for this jail, and the jail is an albatross around our neck, and we don't have enough money coming in? And I'll give you an example of something. And the reporter from the Democrat Gazette has an office there at the Pulaski County Courthouse before this pandemic anyway. And so he had the opportunity to go from courtroom to courtroom and see what was happening. When the state took over probation under the community punishment, there was just the African-American judges over there at the courthouse who did criminal cases. We were the only ones that kept our own probation department. and we did not send it to, it was at the time, I think it was Proctor and me. We didn't send it to the Department of Community Punishment or Community Correction, whichever name they're going by now. So one judge, for instance, had 2 probation officers on his staff, a white judge. Well, he sent his probationers to the Department of Community Correction, which meant that the 2 probation officers that he had on his staff were no longer going to be seeing probationers. And therefore, what's the need for him to have 2 probation officers? Well, I don't know it to be the case, but I just surmise that if I had given up my probation department, that members of the quorum court would have said, well, you don't need those 2 probation officers working for you anymore. We can save the county some money. And I believe that the newspaper would have written a story about it. And I tried to keep those probation officers, those 2 positions. That didn't happen with the white judge who sent away his probationers, but still was able to retain those 2 positions on his staff so that he didn't have to terminate 2 people from his staff. It's that kind of thing that that's difficult to present to the public, and it's not worth presenting to the public. And I wasn't going to raise an issue of it because I didn't want to see people lose a job. But I do think that if the circumstances had been different or turned around, that there would have been a clamor for me to get rid of 2 people.
And some of that is awfully subtle, isn't it?
It's real subtle. That's the kind of thing that I think that that you're up against, and the public doesn't see that, doesn't know that it's going on. But my staff members know that. They could see the difference in the way that they were treated as opposed to someone else, and people may, we comment on about how does he keep 2 people over there if he sends all his probation to the state? They no longer report over there. What's the justification for having those 2 positions, especially when we can't get certain things? And since my folks have more probation officers, maybe they ought to get more of a raise. We didn't make an issue of that because I didn't want to say anything about the folks who were working over there. Didn't really want to see them lose a job anyway.
Marion, let me tell you that you have greetings from Bill Carr, who speaks of what a great supporter you were in the pastoral care program at UAMS.
Where's Bill now? Is he in Oregon or Washington? Which Western state?
Maybe he'll type it in for us. Becky, are you still here with us? This is Becky Purcell, who had a question. Hi.
Yes. And Reverend Judge Humphrey, may I call you that?
I go
Reverend Judge.
No.
Yeah. And I want to apologize for not having my camera on. Zoom has told me I can't, and I don't understand why. I'll try to figure that out today. Listening to you talk, Reverend Humphrey, and you just spoke to, we've got to battle racism by addressing stereotypes, but as you describe the situation with the probation officers, you, Carol, used the word subtle. You were navigating very carefully and very alertly, is that right? But with a great alertness, a situation that I wonder, do you have a personal philosophy that guides you? You've spoken of your faith. You clearly see God's hand. The lectionary passage, last Sunday was Joseph and all the navigating he had to do to be able to bless and preserve his brothers. Do you have a personal philosophy that helps you navigate?
It is my faith. I mean, the faith is at the core of it. And my belief, and I also understand practically that you can't fight every battle. You have to choose them sometimes, and you want to cooperate with people as much as possible. There are times that you might want to draw the line. It's that kind of consideration. You just, and you can't worry about everything and get upset over everything if you're going to maintain some measure of sanity.
Yeah.
So that's a one-word answer, really, is faith. And oh,
For the
that's
faith
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Felicia. Peter, help me with that. Her name, she shows up as
Oh.
Angela here, and she's from
Good
Dallas.
morning, Judge Humphrey. This is, you know me as Felicia Turner from Lono.
I know you. Your dad and my mother-in-law went to school together. I know you, and your daughter's friends with my son, who's supposed to be moving home today. But
He just graduated from law school?
No, this will be his 3L, but since it's all virtual, he decided not to renew his lease, and that he'd come here, and we have a place. It just so happened that we didn't have a tenant in this particular place, so he's gonna have his own crib.
Oh my, okay. Well, I have to say I didn't realize until today that you were actually from Pine Bluff.
You didn't?
I did not know that. Were you born there?
Yes. Where else is there? Where else would I be from? But
We have that in common because I was born there when my parents were students at at Arkansas A&M back then.
right.
I didn't know that,
Yeah.
but I knew your
I'm
wife
from
and
the
my
east side.
dad were from the same community. I learned some things I didn't know, including that, but I did have one question because you went to the University of Arkansas Law School,
Yes.
right? And that was sometime after, as we refer to them, the pioneers, the first Black students there.
Yes.
I'm wondering about what your experience was like at that law school.
It was difficult because first of all, my head wasn't in it really. My heart wasn't in it rather, I think, and so my head usually follows my heart. So I thought it was a different atmosphere and than other schools that I attended, even in the Northeast. And law school is just different. Law school is different from undergrad, and it is not an opportunity, as I said before, to express your position, come up with your own thesis on something. And so I wasn't a good law student, and I left law school after a year and a half and I went to divinity school in between. I don't encourage anyone to do that. But I don't like having credits that couldn't be transferred to anything. And I might sound real evangelical, which I may be too anyway, but I went back to law school for two reasons, I think. One, I didn't like those credits that I had that I couldn't apply to any other discipline. And secondly, on that, I guess the ministerial thing, I had a good friend who was there. I was trying to get back to see him. He was insisting on staying at the University of Arkansas. I knew him from the Black Student Organization, and he was battling leukemia.
Oh my.
And so his parents down in North Little Rock didn't want him to be up there because they were always concerned about getting a telephone call. And so I applied to get back in. And here again, things worked out. Harvard Divinity School had a requirement that you stay on campus for the whole 3 years. And if I had gone back when I went back, I would have finished in 2.5. And the university law school had a requirement that you finish your course of study within 5 years. And as it turned out, I would have had to have 6 years. So I had to get a special waiver from both institutions in order to return when I returned. And so by the fact that both of them gave me that waiver, I said, yeah, this is what God wants me to do.
Mary?
That's the way I reasoned it at the time, that if it's going to work out this way. Unfortunately, he passed right before I got back. I had applied in that fall semester return in January, and he died in October before I got back there. But those were two motivating reasons, and I just don't like the idea of, as I said, having those credits out there and not being able to use them.
We're sneaking up on our hour here. Anybody, is there another question? We could probably take one more question, and then, as I said before, if you want to hang around, Marion is willing to do that. So, Stuart, you seeing anybody else?
I do not see anybody with their hand raised electronically.
Okay, but then let me say for the whole group how much we appreciate you being here with us today, Marion. That's been a blessing for us, and to all of you that joined us, thank you for taking your time to be here, to be a part of this endeavor. We're doing a week by week, month by month, see where we go from here with the We're Listening, but we will be in touch with you if we're going to resume that. So just stay on if you have some other questions, and I know I have a few to follow up on some of the things, but thank you again for being here. If this is a time you need to leave, please feel free to do that, or stay with us. And you're getting some thanks from Linda Whitworth Reed.
I see that.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah.
All right, thank you. But Marion, could you follow up a little bit on Felicia's question, which was your experience in the law school?
Yes. Well, first of all, as I said, law is a different field of study, and so it was not altogether pleasant experience for me. And I thought that I think that professors give you what's there, and it's the approach they take. I just hated any kind of. I wasn't used to just having everything dependent upon one grade too.
I guess I was wondering with your professors or with fellow law students, I'm assuming that you were one of few Black students at that time, or
Actually, I think there were more then than what there are now, or pretty. If my son's class is any indication, there were more of us than there were of his. And he is, let me see, he's a 3L. I think there are now 5 African Americans in his class.
Whoa.
It started out to be maybe double that number, but not much more. I think there were more.
That's interesting.
When I was there. And some of that has to do with recruitment.
Okay.
It has to do with finances. I think a lot of people now wonder, should they make the investment? Does it pay off?
Right.
Because students are saddled with so much student loan now. And the expense of going to school, and you have to work a couple of years or more to get straight on those investments, pay them off.
That's interesting.
I don't know exactly what all has led to this, but the numbers, I think, were larger than they are now.
My goodness, that's very interesting.
Now, I think the atmosphere too, when I went there, most students felt that there was racism in grading and stuff like that. It's hard to know precisely. You may think that, but no one knows for sure. And then again, law school isn't nurturing. It's more like prep school was.
Right.
And so there were a number of things. I can't put all of mine off on school because I had other things going on in my life, other things. I didn't feel I was in the right place at some point. for me
Uh,
personally.
Marion, Ebony, who I have never met except on line, has a question for you. Ebony?
Hi, Judge Humphrey. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Everyone?
I can.
Good morning. I got this invitation from Miss Carol, and I'm so very happy that I did, because I've always wanted to meet you, and I lived in Arkansas and I didn't get to meet you, and I was just so disappointed. But I did graduate from University of Arkansas in Little Rock, and I have also talked to Dean Epps now. I met her actually at University of Arkansas in Little Rock many years ago, and I just
And
wanted
you
to know
emailed me recently, haven't you?
Yes, I just wanted to know, Judge, what would you tell someone that is a young Black woman that is interested in getting into law right now? I just need some encouragement.
If that is your heart's desire, I very much encourage it, because we need lawyers. And this is a state where we need lawyers all over the place. Where are you from originally, Ebony?
Kansas City, Missouri, but I moved back to Denver. That's where I'm at now. So I'm trying to debate if I want to try to get into law school here, or if I just rather come back to Arkansas and go there.
I think if you want to be a lawyer, you should go for that. I really do. I think the opportunities are there. And although it's one thing about Jim Miller up at Fayetteville.
Is he still there?
Yes, he is.
He's always trying to recruit minorities. Yes, I probably should give him a call.
Yeah, you do need to call Jim, and Jim scrapes for money.
Okay.
He really does. He's still there.
Okay.
So I would communicate with him, most definitely.
Okay. I don't know if I would want to go to Fayetteville, though.
Well, I don't know if he can help you anywhere else.
There's another law school in Little Rock University where we met.
But you're not there anymore, Dean Epps.
Or you could come here. I'm here.
Very good, Dean. Yes.
UNC Dallas College.
Yes, that's true.
Good recruitment.
So I do have another option.
Options. You've got options.
Yes.
Explore them all.
Okay.
I would say go.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the Hunt decree? Do I have the name right?
Yes, it's the name comes from Eugene Hunt, who's a Pine Bluff attorney, and he filed a lawsuit pursuant to the Voting Rights Act to establish districts from which African Americans would have an opportunity to be elected or to have more impact. And the decree came about because it was a settlement between the parties who filed it and the state. I'm not even sure that would be done today as it was back in 1991. In 1991, there was more support, I think, for voting rights issues in the federal courts, the U.S. Supreme Court. And so at the time, Winston Bryant was the Attorney General, and he thought that the state would lose the case, and he was willing to compromise. I'm told that Chief Justice Jack Holt was willing to enter into this decree once the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals were taken out of it, because the original suit involved creating some district out of which there might have been African Americans enough impact to elect someone to those courts. And Bill Clinton wanted the matter settled because he was running for president of the United States. And there was also a legislative voting rights lawsuit going on. And Clinton wanted all of this stuff settled because in his travels, say to places like Kansas City or Denver, or especially places like New York and California, the more aggressive Black voters would question him on why there were so many voting rights lawsuits in his state. And here he is trying to get Blacks nationwide to vote for him.
Good.
So
Thank you.
there again, the timing has something to do with it. And so there were some districts created here, areas where there are substantial Black population. There's one down in Southeast Arkansas. It's now held by Quincy Ross Jr., a young man. He's from Monticello. You might have known his aunt, Dean Epps, Luvanda Ross. I don't know if you knew her. And he has the seat that she had won but never got to serve in because she died before she was sworn in.
Thank you. That helps me. And David Clark has a question.
Yes.
And then Mary Ellen after that.
Thank you.
Hi,
David?
Hey, Judge. I also did not realize you're from Pine Bluff. I would have been in the Pine Bluff High School class of '73. So I lived through that consolidation of schools in 1970. When everything kind of blew up this spring, my session came to me and said, what can we do? And being good Presbyterian, I've been rapidly consuming books and seminars. But one of the things that has struck me is that, and I'm involved in a seminar through Johnson C. Smith Theological Seminary, and we've got people from all over the country. And when we break into our breakout groups, I'm generally the only person there from the South. And to realize how different my experience is as a 65-year-old man from the South than someone who grew up in New Jersey or whatever, it's just amazing to me. But when I left the practice of law in 1995 and went into education and ended up in East Arkansas, one of the things I was struck in Cross County was that nobody substantially younger than me, Black or white, knew that much about the racial history of our communities, our states, our regions. And it just seems, that it's even more so, at least when I deal with the people I have come into contact with the church who did not grow up around here. What do we do to make, I saw that either through my own personal experience or through the massive amount of reading that I do. But even then, when I pick up a book, I'm currently reading The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And when I read about things that he talks about going on in Arkansas, when I heard Judge Griffin speak about, of course, a little bit older than I am, but hearing what Judge Griffin went through as a young man, growing up in the region where I grew up, how do we make people understand that there's a huge, long history behind this? That this is not a problem that's confined to 2020. That this is a problem that goes back throughout our history. How do we communicate that to folks?
Well, first of all, I think they have to be interested in learning about it.
Right.
People are around to explain what happened or to tell their stories. And it's a matter of whether or not people have an interest in it. Now, as to young people in the African-American community, I just think that many of them have grown up in such an atmosphere that this stuff is unimaginable to them, or they just don't understand how it was allowed to occur, and they don't really know what it took to have the changes that we have today. I just think that people have to talk about it, and that's what we're not doing.
I keep running into people say, this would all just go away if we just didn't keep talking about it.
They say
they think the whole problem would go away if we would all just stop talking about it.
I don't think so. I think
I don't think so either, but I hear that from people. I'm not racist, so if we just quit talking about it, everybody else would be okay too. I do think the last 3.5 years have given a lie to that, but.
Right.
Mary Ellen?
Thank you. I would like for you to address Black Lives Matter. It seems to me, and of course it's a great slogan, And I truly believe that we believe that. We do believe that Black Lives Matter. I wonder, because there is so much black on black crime, not just crime, but murders, that does the black community actually believe that Black Lives Matter?
Well, I understand your question, and
You understand what I'm trying to say?
And I understand what you're trying to say, and my answer there is absolutely. We believe that Black Lives Matter. That's why I didn't allow that young man to withdraw his guilty plea, is because I believe that Black Lives Matter. He could have withdrawn it, and you know, and that wasn't mandatory. That I held that. There's a lot of white on white crime too, and I let me emphasize, make some points here. First of all, with respect to the Black Lives Matter, a lot of people mistake the thrust of it in terms of saying that you only care if there's a white officer who kills an African American, but you don't care if a black person kills another black person. That's really missing the point. The reason Black Lives Matter is important for addressing police action is because when a police officer does that, he is acting under the authority of the state. That is state action. And all of us have to be concerned about state action. The second thing is, too often, no one is held accountable for it. And so therefore, if police go in Breonna Taylor's house and kill her while she's lying asleep in her bed, people also are aware of the fact that that doesn't normally happen with white people. So that involves a racial consideration. Or the thing with Ahmaud Arbery down in Georgia, or with even Trayvon Martin, which wasn't a police action, but George Zimmerman acted like he was some kind of police officer. He was a wannabe, who's in his own, walking down the street, minding his own business. When those kinds of things happen, then we look at it as though that could have been me. That could have been my son. Yeah, my son will speak up and defend himself in argument and stuff. And I have to caution him: don't say too much to a police officer. Just be quiet and you bring that issue to me. Let me handle it. The accountability issue. Now, you take what happened down at SAU. One of the relatives of one of those young men who called me, and I think called about representation or something of that matter. She said right off, she said, I understand somebody white down there said, what about Black Lives Matter? This is a situation where you've got 4 African Americans charged with the killing of that young Smith gentleman. Now, note this, action has been taken. 4 people are charged. 4 people are held without bond. The judge didn't even set a bond. So what is there a need to protest? I mean, you don't see black folks protesting the fact that these people are charged. The correct action has been taken. The police went out, they investigated it, they charged some people. And those people are going to have to defend themselves. And we're not certain that all 4 of them are guilty. Yet all 4 of them have been charged, and they're going to have their day in court. That has not been the case where police officers kill African Americans. I don't understand how, what's his name, Gauvin is charged with a 2nd-degree murder in the state of Minnesota when he had his knee on the neck of George Floyd. To me, that should be 1st-degree murder. But before that, the The action got started because it was police acting as the state. Those 4 boys down in Magnolia were not acting with the authority of the state, but the power of the state behind them. And the state has power. They weren't acting with the power of the state behind them. And then secondly, they were arrested. And often there has been no arrest in the murder of Breonna Taylor in her home, in her bed, not bothering anybody. And as the police then come along and say it was the wrong house, and the person that we were looking for was already in custody. Well, at minimum, everybody should be fired for incompetence.
Really?
You are looking for somebody who is already in jail. Why are you looking for somebody who's in jail? It's incompetent that you didn't check the jail laws, that you didn't try to find out before you go barging into that house and creating that scenario where this young lady ends up dead. So you look at the situation in Chicago. People I know and associated with want something done about Chicago. They would like to see something done in those places to stop these murders. But there again, and it might be a little paranoia here and there, but people have always wondered how in the world did all these gangs get started, and how were they allowed to exist?
Continue. Yeah, really.
There has always been a strong suspicion that others gain from what the drug guys do, and they do. For instance, all this issue with crack cocaine in our community. Well, cocaine still comes from the cocoa plant, and you don't grow that in the United States. So how in the world did it get to be so prominent in our communities and start all of this turf warfare and stuff if the drug has to be imported from somewhere else? How has that been allowed to occur? Why hasn't our government taken action to destroy these fields where the plants are being grown in these other states, in these other nations, and put some pressure on that? Why is this stuff still coming into the country? Do the Crips and the Bloods get on an airplane or a boat and ship and go get the stuff, wearing their blue bandanas or their red bandanas? I don't think so. And to the extent that our government has some complicity, I think, in not destroying that whole enterprise. We can go after whatever it is that we want to go after. We can find out where Muammar Gaddafi is and kill him, or Osama bin Laden or whomever. We can find out where these folks are, and you've got these fields out here where these plants are growing, and the stuff is going to end up in Watts or Detroit or in Little Rock or Pine Bluff or Dumas, some of these places. I think there needs to be a real reckoning on that particular issue of how is this drug traffic carried out. And what we see in the courts is that you go after African Americans in their houses for having the stuff, but how does it get to them?
Mm-hmm.
That has been the issue, and from getting to them, then there becomes turf warfare, and that leads to these kinds of killings that you have in a community such as Chicago. But what can be done to intercept the drugs, that trafficking of them before they get to these particular neighborhoods is what I think that we need to take a look at. But getting back to, if that's a roundabout way of discussing this, and I think it's all related, so I don't think it was just a random discussion. What we do care about I know I care about it. I care about any time there's a life taken, white or black. And another point, there's some, you know, I go in some courts and some other places, especially since I've been off the bench and have had cases in one of a few places. If you go into some other communities, there are white people who are in jails, depending on the county in Arkansas, because you don't have a whole lot of blacks in some of these other places. And while I was on the bench, even though I don't believe in it, there were 3 death penalty verdicts that were pronounced by jurors. And in Arkansas, the legislature has taken away from judges any discretion in those matters. Those are truly jury issues, but it was bad enough as it is. And so I had 3, there were 3 times when jurors imposed the death penalty. And on one of them, after it was imposed, the defendant filed a Rule 37, and I ruled that there was some ineffective assistance of counsel, and the Supreme Court upheld me. I think the vote was like 4-3 though, so that I set aside his death penalty, and he has a life sentence. And that was a black guy by the name of James Fudge. There were 2 white people who received the death penalty. One is on death row, and the other one has been executed. And she was a woman, Christina Riggs, and she was executed for killing her 4-year-old and 1-year-old children. And even at that, Christina Riggs I believe she could have avoided the death penalty anyway had they put on a different kind of defense, even though it was during that same era of the Susan Smith killing her kids over in South Carolina. And so the jury was impacted, I think, by what was going on. But her defense was something like, I have never seen before. Her lawyer started off by saying, you know, we're pleading not guilty by reason of mental disease, a defect. You know, she's got to be crazy to kill her kids. I mean, that was like his opening statement, and his attitude, the way he handled it was like that all the way through. In fact, when she was convicted, and we have a bifurcated system, we find the person, you deal with the guilty innocence first, then you come back and do the penalty phase of it. And there are only 2 penalties that are available for capital murder, one being death and the other being life without parole. They took the position that you didn't buy our defense of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect, go ahead and execute it. And he so much as said it like that to the jury. And I just said, my goodness, what are they doing in my courtroom conducting this trial like this? And so I ordered that he file an appeal on her behalf of the conviction and the penalty. He filed a petition for writ of prohibition to the Arkansas Supreme Court, saying that she didn't want to appeal her death penalty, and for the court to prohibit me from ordering him to file an appeal in that case. And the Arkansas Supreme Court granted their petition, Christina Riggs' petition through her attorney. And so I was prohibited from ordering her to appeal it. On the sentencing phase, she took the stand and she said, well, you know, my lawyer and I have discussed this. We discussed it, and I've let him know that if it came down to this death penalty or life, I wanted to be executed and go be with my kids. And I had not seen anything like that before, and I hated that they were in my particular court with this. But, and I think she could have been spared, her life could have been spared had she brought back her sister in particular and others in her family to testify about the experiences they had had growing up or their mental issues. Wow. Now, our mental evaluations are done at the state hospital everything, and their determination was that she was not suffering from mental disease or defect at the time she did that. You know, to some extent, her lawyer might have had a point when he said, you know, she's got to be crazy to kill her kids. But you've got to establish that clinically. And they just didn't have it. And so she was executed, and she was executed pretty quickly. The other guy is still on death row, and this has been he's been on death row since about 93 or 94, whenever we were in the temporary building doing renovations to the courthouse, because I remember that case came up when we were in the old KARK building in those temporary quarters. But he killed 4 people. And he, the only thing that I can divine from what was said at the trial is that he was upset because his girlfriend was in this trailer dancing with somebody else. And so he had gone in, and he was looking for her too, but he shot and killed 4 people, and she was able to hide somewhere in the trailer. I don't know how she did that, but she did, and she got out. And I saw his lawyer in the hallway one day, and I said to him, I said, can you get the prosecutor to work out a deal? Can you work out a deal with the prosecutor where he'll just plead guilty and get a sentence of life? Can't you talk to her? It was a female prosecutor, by the way, who's really a good prosecutor. I may not agree with the death penalty. She's good. She does good legal work. And his response to me was, I already have asked her, and she said, there are too many dead bodies, and don't ask me no more. Don't ask me about waiving the death penalty.
I think you should write a book, is one thing I've learned today. You definitely need to write a book for it. Or sign on to the Law and Order staff or something like that.
Well, that person may be executed sometimes. So that's Nancy. And Nancy, I looked all over for a telephone number for you. I'm sorry, during that time.
Nancy, did you hear that?
She's trying to say she's still on mute, but she thinks she's saying something, but she's on mute.
No, I'm unmuted. I'm going to talk.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I just want to say you're one of my very favorite people, and I thank you for your standing in this community. You've just done thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for helping me out in that campaign. You and I remember Martha Carville helping me out.
Yeah. But thank you for all your consideration and your love that you share. Really, thank you.
Anybody have one last question? Well, again, Marion, it's just been wonderful. Thank you for the time you've given to us. We really appreciate that. Stuart, thank you for your tech work. We appreciate that very much, and all of you for being here. And certainly do wish you all a good day and God's blessings.
Carol, I think we need to clap like we would see on the convention.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do that for Marion.
Thank you, Marion.
But I'm glad that question was asked about Black Lives Matter, because I do think even more should be said about some of these occurrences and what it's doing to people, because this hurts people. It hurts people on all sides.
It does.
It really does. I know the grandmother, one of those who's charged, is really, really shaken and upset, and she's a missionary in the Church of God in Christ, and that young man's uncle called me as well, and you know, they just don't know what to make out of it.
You know, I think I will always have that image that you lifted up for us of the family over here and the family over there. That's, really, really powerful. And I thank you for that. We appear to want to linger in your good presence, sir.
Thank you, thank you.
We don't seem to want to leave.
Now, the division that we are encountering now in racial and in political and all these different things are just making this whole nation sad, you know. And I don't know how do we fix anything except with the power of God.
That's it.
And yeah. And you know, but I keep saying, God, you're not working fast enough.
We're not listening.
Let us help, but it's just the waiting, and it's I wish we could do something. Just to be the praying. Thank you.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marion. Thank
You're
you.
so
Carol.
welcome anytime.